Hey everyone, it's finally time to go over the last tier list when it comes to meta-analysis this season, and that's going to be the subclass tier list. Now, before we get started, I know some of you were leaving comments and corrections on my last tier list where fragment and aspect, some of the details were a little bit outdated. So I've gone through every single fragment and aspect, and it hasn't really changed placement stuff because, obviously I know what the fragments and aspects do in game, but some of the descriptions, I failed to kind of update them correctly to match up with their most recent versions. So I went ahead and I went through every single fragment and aspect and updated it to match what the compendium says. Some of you might even have details that the compendium doesn't include. So after this recording, I will go and check through the YouTube comment section and correct anything that needs to be fixed. But for now, hopefully this is good enough. So fragments and aspects, all updated. Let's get started with the actual subclass tier list. Now you notice here, this looks really different than last time, right? This looks really, really different. And I've completely redone how I do the subclass tier list. Now keep in mind, this is a holistic look at the Endgame sandbox. This is not day one specifically, although day one obviously dominates a large portion of what people consider Endgame, but this would include stuff like solos, maybe GM Vanguard alerts, stuff like that. Basically anywhere where your loadout, your decisions with your loadout actually matter, right? Actually matter. I did take out speedrunning focus, so like movement stuff is not really a factor here. But for the most part, anything that you would consider to be endgame, where your loadout choices really start to matter, they matter when it comes to changing the effectiveness of how you play, that's going to be considered, and that's what's going to result in certain subclasses being ranked higher than others in this tier list. So let's go ahead and talk about the factor families here, right? There's three of them. You got survivability, you got damage, and you got efficacy. I'll explain what my thought process was going into selecting each of these. So first you have survivability. Survivability, fairly straightforward. It's, is the subclass good at surviving, at not dying in high pressure environments? So there's three components here. Number one is DR. Now, when I was envisioning DR, the thing that I had in mind was DR sources that are able to keep up consistently, right? So stuff like Amplified, stuff like Woven Mail, stuff like Frost Armor, that counts. But stuff like your Rift animation DR, which a lot of people don't know about, you have some damage resist when you first place your Rift or Barricade. In that animation, I believe it's 20%, you get a little bit of DR. But that's not something you can have up all the time. So we want something that's consistently reducing the damage that is being done to your health bar. That's damage resist. Now, number two, the second component is sustain. Sustain is basically stuff that can heal you through chip damage. Now, there are some exceptions here that are, they're more like crowd control rather than sustain, but I didn't want to put them in the DR section. I thought they fit better into the sustain section. So that's stuff like Ionic Sentry, Bleak Watcher, Threaded Spectre, stuff that basically either draws fire away from you and keeps that chip damage from even reaching you, or stuff that kind of blinds enemies and freezes them and, stops them from shooting, right? So that's sustain. You have obviously stuff like Devour, Healing Rift, Combination Blow, Knockout, Banner of War, Healing Grenade, all sorts of things like that. That's stuff that keeps you alive, right? That's sustain. Third, we have response. Response is basically, oh shit, I'm gonna die. I need to press this button, right? So anything that you can press that maybe gives you a burst of DR, a burst of healing, a burst of ad clear. Any mix of these things, a Healing Grenade is a great example, Phoenix Dive is a great example, pressing your Rift or pressing your Rally Barricade while kind of moving away from an ad, that can kind of get you out of trouble. Not the best, right? Which is why you'll see the score is lower for just Rally Barricade, but at its best, you have stuff like Weave Walk. Weave Walk is an excellent escape tool that will basically allow you to survive literally anything, right? Even if you're 1 HP, if you pop Weave Walk, the likelihood of you dying, unless you were literally like 1 HP as you cast it, is basically 0, right? So that's like escape tools, response tools, clutch tools, right? We've talked about this on this channel in the past. Okay, next we have damage. So this is offensive stuff. We have supers. Now, supers, this is specifically relating to damage supers, because a lot of the time in endgame PvE, when it comes to like day ones, or when it comes to really a lot of different content like raids and stuff, people pick subclasses based on how good the damage super is, whether you like it or not, right? No matter what the aspects are, even if Arc Titan, for example, neutral gameplay on Arc Titan is not the greatest, especially if you have to play on something like Curus and not Skullfort, so you don't have Thunderclap DR all the time, people still choose to play Arc Titan over the other Titan subclasses strictly because the super is better for damage. So I did include non-burst damage super here, like Geomag Chaos Reach, like Storm Dancer, Storm Trance, like, Silk Strike, stuff like that. But obviously, more sustained damage supers that do similar DPS to good heavy weapons, while lacking burst DPS, they're going to be lower scored on this section compared to other stuff in the category, like Nova Bomb, like Nighthawk, etc. Okay, so this is considering exotics as well. This section over here, survivability, I didn't consider exotics as much, but they were a small factor. Okay, next we have abilities. Now, abilities, this is specifically referring to ability damage. So mostly you're looking at stuff like Grapple Melee, turrets, you have Storm's Keep as part of here, you have like Throwing Hammer, you have Young Amkar Spine Trip Mines. So stuff like this kind of factors in. I'm not obviously accounting for stuff like chunking handheld supernova. That's not really fair to include in the comparison. I'm assuming that's going to be patched out. But most of the stuff that you're familiar with seeing when it comes to ability tick damage or raw ability focus damage, that's not super damage. Okay? And then finally, we have team play. So team play is a bit of a broad category. This is anything where you're assisting your team when it comes to fire team DPS. So Banner of War, provision to your teammates. Banner Shield, Empowering Rift to give your teammates ability regen. You have Song of Flame for snap stunning bosses as well as providing DR. You have Dominance for, debuff extension. You have Twilight Arsenal for debuff extension. You have Widow's Silk for creating grapple points. There's a lot of stuff that goes into this, but basically anything that assists your teammates when it comes to dealing fire team damage. Okay? And then finally, we have Efficacy. Now, Efficacy is, at the end of the day, subclasses, you can look at them on paper in isolation. Efficacy is where you bring them into the real world. So Efficacy, we have two categories. We have Roam and we have Not Swap. Roam is specifically for encounters where you can stay on one loadout the entire time. Well, I mean, I guess in Not Swap you can as well. The encounter is more focused on ad clear, and you can really lean into the subclass's strength and lean into an exotic that specifically amplifies a subclass's ideal situation, right? So maybe if you're playing Stasis Titan, instead of running like an exotic that would boost your super or something like that, you can run an exotic that's really focused on generating a lot of crystals or something like that. Even though I guess on Stasis Titan, you would run Syntho in both situations, you kind of get the drift, right? You're more focused on ad clear, survivability, playing into the subclass's strengths. Not Swap is this subclass performant under not swap conditions? So basically, does it have a valuable damage super or team play to bring to the team paired with an armor exotic? Or, outside of that situation, is it still playable? Like you're not sacrificing too much to play this subclass to be optimal during damage and not have to suffer as much during neutral, right? That's what Not Swap, that's kind of like a combination. Both of them are basically the types of things you would be doing under contest, right? Under a day one, if you have like a puzzle encounter where you're not expected to do damage, you'd be looking more in the roam category. And then for the Not Swap category, that's more for like a boss damage encounter, right? Now, after making this tier list, I do have some thoughts. I realized that I probably need to do a build tier list at some point because builds, whether you like it or not, are basically like there's like a sequence here, right? Fragments, they're cool to rank in isolation, but they're actually pretty far removed from how people view build crafting. Aspects, they're also pretty cool to rank in isolation. They're slightly less far removed from how people, view decision making when it comes to build crafting, but they're still isolated a little bit. Now, even subclasses, when you look at subclasses in isolation, they look like they're very impactful when it comes to build crafting choices. But at the end of the day, people choose to build around combinations, and combinations are builds, right? So eventually I will have to make a build tier list, and that will be kind of the final, nail in the coffin when it comes to endgame analysis. But that's going to take a while. We'll get there eventually. We have a lot of dead time this season, so hopefully I'm able to get somewhere near that at some point, at least start working on that, because I know that's been on the back burner for a long time. But let's go ahead and reveal the total scoring for this tier list. Now, two notes, right? Two notes. Like I said, number one, this is a holistic tier list. It goes over all of endgame PV, whether it's roam content like GM Vanguard alerts, whether it's a little bit of speedrunning. I'm not talking about movement stuff, but specifically optimizing fire team damage, stuff like that. Solo challenges, maybe trio, duo challenges, master challenges, whatever it is. And of course, day ones, right? So this is not just day one. This is not just day one. If this was just day one, for example, Solar Warlock would probably be higher, right? It's in the A tier. It would probably be in the S tier, okay? But Solar Warlock is obviously not the greatest when it comes to playing solo, right? It's obviously not the greatest when it comes to DR stacking. It's not the greatest when it comes to, ad clear. So because of that, you got to dock it a couple points. Let's go ahead and briefly, I'll just go over the tier list in terms of total scoring. Prismatic Hunter and Prismatic Warlock are both at the top of the chart here, S tier, 70 and 69 points respectively. I don't think I really need to explain why. Prismatic Hunter is the best DR stacker in the game, and Prismatic Warlock is not the best DR stacker in the game, but extremely easy to play and very, very versatile, especially when it comes to not swap scenarios compared to Prismatic Hunter, right? Then you have Prismatic Titan, which is a little less versatile, a little less DR, pretty survivable still because of just your raw ability ad clear, but not as versatile certainly compared to something like Prismatic Warlock or Prismatic Hunter. And then you have a bunch of other choices here. You have Strand Titan, Strand Warlock. I'll go over the ones that might be a bit more surprising to people. So Strand Warlock, I think, is actually pretty decent. If they gave it a stronger damage super, so like Matiodoxia got a buff, which I think it deserves one, to be honest with you. Weave Walk is extremely consistent. Matiodoxia itself is one of the better, super damage exotic pairings compared to like Curus and Nighthawk, which basically have to rely on the base forms of their kit in order to keep up survivability, because their neutral effects are not very good. Matiodoxia is perfectly usable with stuff like Mind Spun plus Weave Walk. So, potentially an interesting choice there. Just pretty decent score over the board. I think Solar Titan being here is pretty expected from people. Arc Titan being here is pretty expected from people. And then Arc Warlock is probably the other one that's maybe a little bit surprising being here. The main reason, the driver for me putting Arc Warlock this high, and I think the thing that pushed it over the edge, is Stormdancer's Brace with Stormtrance. It's actually pretty good. It does 60k total damage, and it does like, I think it's like 4.4k DPS, which is like, that is where you want to be. That is like an ideal like sustained damage super. Like most damage supers like Chaos Reach or like Gathering Storm, like, you know, tick damage supers where you're kind of just letting them sit for a while. I guess Gathering Storm is not really a good example, but like Song of Flame, Blade Fury, stuff like that, where you're in the super for an extended period of time, they don't perform nearly as well, and they have extra requirements like biotic enhancements. Stormdancers doesn't have this requirement. It's very, very straightforward. And although it's not Prismatic Warlock, I mean, you can make the argument that you should just run Stormdancers on Prismatic Warlock if you want to use Stormtrance for damage. The neutral play of Arc Warlock, despite the fact that you can't DR stack as much, is actually pretty solid. It's actually pretty solid, and you do have Spark of Resistance and Amplified combined, which for neutral play is like enough to keep you around for contest content and not get one shot randomly, which there are other subclasses which kind of can get one shot randomly, and people still play them during contests, right? For other reasons, but you know, people still play them during contests. So I think Arc Warlock is a little bit underrated. We have B tier here. That's going to be Void Hunter, which includes Mobius Quiver being ranked at a 9 out of 10 because of its current kind of crossbow situation. Once that gets resolved, I might move this up to a 10. I might move it down to an 8. We'll see how that happens. I'm not including the bug here, but just the base behavior of being able to empower crossbows that much easily puts that thing up at a 9 for me. You have Solar Hunter, which is good because of On Your Mark. That's probably why it's been in the B tier. We have Arc Hunter, which is really, really good neutral, really, really poor team play and super damage. We have Void Titan, which has potential with Sentinel Shield, but again, not super, super strong when it comes to the super damage department, ability damage department, but the sustain is actually pretty decent, even though DR stacking is not the greatest. And then C tier, you have Strand Hunter, you have Stasis Titan, Stasis Hunter, Void Warlock, which you might be surprised by, but Void Warlock, if you played Void Warlock in, for example, I played a Void Warlock for Contra Chunking on GM Warden of Nothing. And, you know, I wasn't playing super carefully or anything, but the lack of DR and underlight content on this subclass is very, very noticeable. Like very, very, very noticeable. You die very, very quickly. So even with Echo Vigilance, which is super nice, it's definitely a lifesaver in some cases. You definitely need to rely on like set bonuses for DR. Whereas with other subclasses, you do have DR like all the time, or you have like Amplified for de-aggro. And so it's definitely like a noticeable difference, even though the ad clear is pretty decent with like manacles and stuff like that. You know, I gave it like a pretty passable score when it comes to roam content. It's just not quite up there with some of the other powerhouses in the sandbox right now. And then finally, we have Stasis Warlock. Yeah, Stasis Warlock is definitely, in my opinion, the worst subclass in the game. You do have some good exotic pairings with like Baladors, which is cool for like Frostweaver provision. You have stuff like Rhymecoat Raiment, which is like decent for ad clear, but the playstyle is just way too slow. The team play is almost non-existent. The damage super is, I literally went back over the damage super numbers while I was making this tier list, and I was like, they can't be that bad, right? And I looked at the Balador's numbers for swap DPS, even with the light canceling tech, and it's still just not good. It's just not good. It's just not good. So yeah, really disappointing, Stasis Warlock, and you know, the score really shows it. That's kind of like a statistically significant score, even if I weighted some factors higher than others. Just pretty disappointing subclass overall in the current sandbox. So yeah, that's pretty much all I wanted to say when it comes to subclasses. Originally, I was going to go through like my scoring for every single one of these categories, but you know, if you guys want, you can make a copy of the sheet and just sort by like Z to A on any of these individual sections here. Or actually, I'll do this for you like right now, so you can like pause the video and you can see how I scored everything from 1 to 10, or like 0 to 10 in some cases, right? But yeah, if I went through and I explained like all my decisions for all of these, it would be splitting hairs. It'd be a lot of time of like me yapping. But hopefully, you know, that satisfies you guys, and you're able to kind of see why I scored certain things higher than others in these categories, given that I explained how the categories work. But I didn't want to make this video too crazy long. But yeah, if you want to take a look at this tier list, it's in my projects folder in the description as usual. And yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you guys are having a good day. I'm going to be editing the raid encounter tier list for speedrunning over the next couple days. It is like a very long amount of, it's like 2 hours long. So I'm going to have to like, you know, pare it down and, you know, just cut out some of the breaks that we took during the tier list. But I hope you guys enjoy that. That's going to be a pretty fun watch, I hope. Hopefully I can manage with the audio of my dynamic mic trying to pick up 4 people. So that's going to be pretty funny. But you guys have a good one, and I'll see you around.